The pounding on Warren Jenkins's door shattered the silence of midnight like a hammer through ice. And when he stumbled from his bed with his old army knife in hand, the last thing he expected to find was an orc woman in a torn wedding dress bleeding onto his porch. She swayed in the doorframe, her green skin pale in the moonlight, one hand pressed against a gash on her ribs that had soaked through the white fabric until it looked black in the darkness. Her tusks were small and delicate, barely visible as she tried to speak through trembling lips. Behind her, the forest stretched dark and infinite, and somewhere in those depths, voices were shouting. Warren had seen plenty of strange things in his 32 years, especially during his time in the border wars, but this was something entirely new. The woman's eyes, a striking amber color that seemed to glow in the lantern light spilling from his cabin, fixed on him with a mixture of desperation and defiance. She was perhaps 22 or 23, with long black hair that had been carefully braided with white flowers, now crushed and wilting. "Please," she managed to say, her voice rough and accented in the way orcs spoke the common tongue. "They are coming." I need her legs buckled, and Warren caught her before she hit the wooden planks of his porch. She was heavier than a human woman of her size would be, all dense muscle beneath the ruined dress, but years of farm work had made him strong enough to handle the weight. He kicked the door shut behind them and carried her to his kitchen table, sweeping aside the maps and ledgers he had been reviewing earlier that evening. The voices in the forest were getting closer. Warren could make out individual words now, harsh syllables in the orcish language he had learned to recognize if not understand during the war. They were hunting her. The realization made his jaw tighten as he grabbed clean cloths from his cupboard and pressed them against the wound on her side. "Stay quiet," he told her, meeting those amber eyes. "Let me think." The woman nodded, biting down on her lower lip to keep from crying out as he applied pressure. Up close, he could see the careful makeup that had been applied to her face, now streaked with sweat and tears. The wedding dress was finely made, with intricate embroidery along the bodice in patterns he did not recognize. Whoever she was, she had been someone important before she ran. Warren moved to the window and peered through the gap in the curtains. Torches flickered between the trees, at least a dozen of them, spreading out in a search pattern. The hunting party was organized and determined, which meant they would not give up easily. His cabin sat on the edge of what had once been disputed territory, 5 miles from the nearest human settlement and 20 from the closest orc village that he knew of. He had chosen this isolation deliberately after leaving the army, wanting nothing more than to work his land in peace. So much for peace. The woman made a small sound and Warren turned back to see her trying to sit up. "No," he said firmly, pressing her back down with one hand on her shoulder. "You have lost blood. You need to stay still." "You should not help me," she said, but there was hope in her voice that contradicted her words. "If they find me here, they will kill you too. Let me worry about that." Warren examined the wound more carefully now that he had better light. It was a knife slash, not too deep but long enough to be serious. "This needs stitching. I have supplies from my army days. It will hurt." "Everything hurts," the woman said with a bitter laugh that turned into a cough. Warren fetched his medical kit from the chest in his bedroom, acutely aware of the torches drawing closer. He had perhaps 10 minutes before the hunters reached his property. When he returned, the woman was staring at the ceiling, her chest rising and falling in rapid, shallow breaths. He threaded the needle with practiced efficiency, remembering too many nights doing this same task for wounded soldiers in field hospitals. "What is your name?" he asked, partly to distract her and partly because he wanted to know. "Kaza," she said. "Kaza of the Red Stone clan, and you are?" "Warren Jenkins, I farm this land. He poured whiskey over the needle and thread, then met her eyes. This is going to hurt like fire. Do you want something to bite down on? Kaza shook her head, her jaw set with determination. I have endured worse today. He believed her. Warren began to stitch, working quickly while trying to be as gentle as possible. To her credit, Kaza barely flinched, though he could see the muscles in her neck standing out like cords and her hands gripping the edge of the table hard enough to make the wood creak. Outside, the voices had stopped shouting, which somehow seemed worse than when they were loud. Why did you run? Warren asked quietly as he worked. From your wedding. Because I could not marry him, Kaza said through gritted teeth. Garuk of the Iron Fist clan, strong, powerful, respected. Everything a bride should want. Her voice dripped with sarcasm on the last sentence. He is also cruel, violent, and he killed his last mate when she displeased him. My father arranged the match to secure an alliance. I am the price of peace between our clans. Warren had seen enough of orcish politics during the war to understand how such arrangements worked. Clan alliances were everything, and the individual rarely mattered compared to the collective good. He tied off the last stitch and cleaned the wound again, then wrapped it with clean bandages. You are going to need rest and time to heal properly. I need to keep moving, Kaza insisted. If they find me, if they find you in this condition, you will not make it another mile. Warren moved to the window again. The torches had formed a perimeter around his property, staying just inside the tree line. They were watching, waiting, smart. They have surrounded us. Running now would be suicide. Kaza tried to sit up again, and this time he let her, steadying her with a hand on her back as she swayed. Her amber eyes swept the cabin, taking in the sparse furnishings, the weapons mounted on the wall from his army days, the books stacked beside his armchair. You were a soldier, she observed. You fought against my people. I fought in the border wars, yes. Warren did not look away from her gaze. I have killed orcs, and orcs have killed men I called friends. That was war, and war is ugly and wrong, and I am done with it. That is why I live out here alone. Then why help me? Kaza's voice was sharp with suspicion now, though Warren thought he heard something else underneath it. Hope, perhaps, or the desperate need to believe that not all humans were enemies. You owe me nothing. You risk everything by sheltering me. Warren moved to his cupboard and began pulling out food, bread, cheese, dried meat, a jar of preserves his neighbor had given him last autumn. He arranged it all on a plate and set it in front of Kaza, then filled a cup with water from the pitcher. Because you are hurt and scared and someone is hunting you, he said simply. That is enough. He watched her stare at the food, her expression unreadable. In the lamplight, he could see details he had missed before the delicate bone structure of her face beneath the orcish features, the way her ears tapered to elegant points, the strength in her shoulders and arms that spoke of a life of physical labor, despite her fine wedding dress. She was, he realized with some surprise, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with human standards and everything to do with the fierce vitality that seemed to radiate from her even in her wounded state. Are you hungry? Warren asked, the question emerging more gently than he had intended. Kaza's eyes snapped up to meet his, and for a moment she looked so vulnerable that it made his chest ache. Then her stomach growled loudly enough that they both heard it, and despite everything the hunters outside, the blood on her dress, the impossibility of the situation, she laughed. It was a real laugh, bright and surprised, and it transformed her face entirely. Yes, she admitted. I have not eaten since yesterday morning. We were supposed to feast after the ceremony, but I ran before it could be completed. Then eat, Warren said. He moved to the window again, studying the pattern of torches. They had not moved in several minutes, which meant the hunters were regrouping or waiting for orders. He estimated there were 15 of them, all male by the size of the shadows, all armed. If they decided to storm the cabin, he could hold them off for a while with his rifle and the tactical advantage of walls and narrow approaches, but eventually they would overwhelm him, unless he gave them a reason not to attack. Warren turned back to find Kaza eating with the focused intensity of someone who had been truly starving. She paused when she noticed him watching, self-conscious suddenly. "I apologize. This is not proper." "There is nothing improper about eating when you are hungry." Warren poured himself a cup of water and sat down across from her. "Listen, Kaza of the Red Stone clan. Those hunters out there are not going to leave as long as they think you are here. I need to understand what we are dealing with. Who leads them?" Kaza swallowed the bread she had been chewing. "Probably my brother Krusk. He would see it as his duty to bring me back. And Garak himself is surely with them. He would not trust anyone else with his runaway bride." She spat the last words like a curse. "They will not negotiate. To run from a wedding is the worst kind of shame. I have dishonored my clan and broken a sacred agreement. Sacred enough to justify murder when they find you. They will not kill me." Kaza's voice was flat. "They will drag me back and force me to complete the ceremony. And then I will belong to Garak, and what he does with me afterward is his right as my husband. If I am lucky, I will die quickly when I inevitably displease him. If I am unlucky—" She did not finish the sentence. Warren felt a familiar anger building in his chest, the same rage he had felt during the war when he saw innocents caught in the grinding machinery of politics and pride. "That is not going to happen." "You cannot stop them," Kaza said, but there was a question in her voice as if she wanted desperately to be proven wrong. "Maybe not alone." Warren stood and moved to his writing desk, pulling out paper and ink. "But I know someone who might be able to help. The human settlement 5 miles south has a magistrate who oversees this region. His name is William Jacobson, and he is a reasonable man. If I can get word to him—" "Human law does not apply to orc matters," Kaza interrupted. "The treaties are very clear about that. Each people governs their own." "The treaties also state that acts of violence on human-claimed land fall under human jurisdiction," Warren countered. "This is my property, registered with the territorial government. If they attack here, it becomes my business and the magistrate's business." He began writing quickly, explaining the situation in brief, clear terms. "I am not saying it is a perfect solution, but it might buy us time and give them a reason to pause." Kaza watched him write with an expression that was hard to read. "Why are you doing this?" She asked again, softer this time. "You could open that door and hand me over right now. They would probably even reward you." Warren finished the letter, sealed it with wax, and met her eyes. 4 years ago, I was ordered to burn an orc village that our commanders claimed was harboring insurgents. We were told everyone inside was a combatant. When we entered, we found mostly women, children, and elders. The fighters had already left to engage our main force." He paused, the memory still bitter after all this time. "I did not burn that village. I let them evacuate and told my superiors it was already abandoned when we arrived. It was the beginning of the end of my military career." "You disobeyed orders," Kaza said, understanding dawning in her eyes. "For strangers, for enemies. For people who did not deserve to die for the crimes of others." Warren stood and moved to the window again. The torches had not moved. "I learned something important that day. The line between good and evil does not run between species or nations. It runs through every individual heart. I would rather die standing on the right side of that line than live comfortably on the wrong one." He could feel Kaza staring at him, but he did not turn around. After a long moment, she said quietly, "Thank you, Warren Jenkins. Whatever happens, thank you for the food and the kindness." I had forgotten what either felt like. The words struck something deep in Warren's chest, but before he could respond, a voice called out from the darkness, speaking in heavily accented common tongue. "Human, we know the female is inside. Send her out and you will not be harmed." Warren opened the door just enough to shout back, "This is private property under territorial law. You are trespassing. Leave now or I will report this incident to Magistrate Jacobson." There was a pause, then laughter from multiple throats. The same voice called back, "You protect our property, human. She belongs to Garuk of the Iron Fist. She is his bride, bound by sacred law. You have no right to interfere. She is a person, not property," Warren shouted. "And she asked for sanctuary. I will not hand over a wounded woman to a mob." More laughter, darker this time. Then a different voice, deeper and rougher, cut through the night. "I am Garuk. That female is mine by right of contract and clan law. Send her out or I will take her by force and burn your dwelling to ashes." Kaza had moved to stand beside Warren, pale but steady on her feet. She looked out at the torches with an expression of resignation. "Let me go," she said quietly. "You have done more than anyone could expect. I will not let you die for me. No." Warren closed the door and barred it, then moved to collect his rifle from above the fireplace. "I have a better idea, but I need you to trust me." "I do not even know you," Kaza pointed out, though her eyes followed him with interest as he checked the rifle's load. "You trusted me enough to knock on my door. Trust me a little longer." Warren returned to his desk and added a postscript to the letter. "My neighbor, Wyatt, checks on me every few days. He is due to come by tomorrow morning. When he does, he will find this letter and take it to the magistrate. That means we need to hold out until dawn, roughly 6 hours from now." 6 hours, Kaza repeated. "And then what? The magistrate arrives and they simply leave." "The magistrate arrives with deputies and the full weight of territorial law. It becomes a diplomatic incident rather than a domestic matter. Your clan and Garuk's clan will have to negotiate with human authorities, which means lawyers and treaties and time, all of which works in your favor." Kaza sat down heavily in the chair near the fireplace, her hand unconsciously moving to her bandaged side. "You speak of laws and negotiations as if they matter. Power is what matters. Garuk has the power here. Power is more complicated than who has the most warriors." Warren began extinguishing lamps, leaving only one burning in the back room. "I learned that in the war too. Strategy, terrain, information, all of these can overcome raw force. And right now, we have the strategic advantage. They have to come to us, which means narrow approaches and known fields of fire. They have to worry about human retaliation if they kill me. And most importantly, they have to wonder what I know and who I have already told." For the first time since she arrived, Kaza smiled a small, tentative expression that softened her features. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Warren Jenkins." "Probably both," Warren admitted. He positioned himself by the window with the rifle. "You should rest. That wound needs to heal and you have lost a lot of blood." "I cannot sleep while you stand watch," Kaza protested. "Then do not sleep, just rest." Warren glanced at her. "Tell me about the Red Stone clan. What are they like?" Kaza seemed surprised by the question, but after a moment, she began to speak. Her voice was soft, almost dreamy as she described the mountains where her clan made their home, the red rock formations that gave them their name, the festivals and traditions that marked the turning seasons. She spoke of her mother, who had died when Kaza was young, and her father, who had grown harder and more focused on clan politics with each passing year. She described her childhood friends, her training in the traditional crafts and fighting arts, the expectations and restrictions that had grown heavier as she approached marriageable age. Warren listened while keeping most of his attention on the torches outside. They had not moved, but he could see shadows shifting between the trees. The hunters were settling in for a siege, which was actually a good sign. It meant they were not confident enough to attack directly. As Kaza talked, he found himself building a picture of her life, so different from his own yet familiar in its fundamental struggles. She was trapped by duty and tradition just as surely as he had been trapped by military orders and expectations. "Why did you become a soldier?" Kaza asked suddenly, turning the question around on him. "Family tradition," Warren said. "My father was an officer and his father before him. It was expected. I was good at it too for a while. Good at following orders, good at tactics, good at keeping men alive in bad situations." He paused, remembering. "But I was not good at forgetting what I saw. Every village we burned, every prisoner we executed, every civilian who got caught in the crossfire, it all stayed with me. I started questioning orders, and that is when everything fell apart. They discharged you." "Honorably, yes, with the understanding that I would disappear quietly and not speak about what I had seen. So I took my savings and bought this land, far from everything and everyone." Warren looked around at the cabin he had built with his own hands. "I thought I could find peace here." "And have you?" Kaza's voice was gentle. Warren considered the question seriously. "I have found quiet. I am not sure that is the same as peace." They fell into a comfortable silence after that, broken only by the occasional sound from outside as the hunters shifted positions or conferred in their own language. Warren found himself acutely aware of Kaza's presence, the sound of her breathing, the way the lamplight caught the planes of her face, the strength evident even in her exhausted state. She was watching him with an expression he could not quite read, something between curiosity and calculation. Around 2 in the morning, Garuk tried again. "Human, I am losing patience. Send out my bride or face the consequences." Warren opened the door a crack. "Your bride seems to have a different opinion about the arrangement. Maybe you should ask yourself why a woman would rather risk death than marry you." The response was a thrown axe that embedded itself in the doorframe 3 inches from Warren's head. He slammed the door shut and locked it again, his heart pounding. Behind him, Kaza had stood up, her eyes wide. "That was foolish," she said, but there was something almost like admiration in her voice. "Probably," Warren agreed. He examined the axe, good steel, well balanced. "But I wanted to see how much control Garuk has over his temper. The answer appears to be not much." "No," Kaza said quietly. "He does not. I have seen him beat subordinates for minor slights. I have heard stories of how his last mate died. He threw her down a ravine during an argument. No one challenged him because he is too strong, too well connected." Warren filed that information away. A leader who ruled by fear and violence rather than respect was a weakness waiting to be exploited. He settled back into his watch position, but now he could feel the tension in the air like a living thing. The hunters were getting restless, and Garuk's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Warren," Kaza said softly, "if it comes to fighting, if they attack, you should not die for me. Promise me you will surrender if it becomes hopeless." "I do not make promises I cannot keep," Warren replied. "But I did not invite you inside just to hand you over later. We see this through together." The words hung in the air between them, heavier with meaning than Warren had intended. Kaza moved closer, close enough that he could smell the fading scent of wedding flowers in her hair mixed with blood and sweat. "Why?" she asked again, a third time, but now the question seemed different. More personal. Warren turned to face her fully, lowering the rifle. Because when you knocked on my door, scared and bleeding and desperate, you could have forced your way in. You could have threatened me or tried to take what you needed. Instead, you said please. You warned me about the danger. You asked, like I was a person whose answer mattered. He paused. In that moment, you showed me more humanity than a lot of humans I have known. Kaza's eyes glistened in the lamplight, and Warren realized she was fighting back tears. No one has ever, she stopped, composed herself. In my clan, strength is everything. Compassion is weakness. Asking is beneath us. We take or we are taken from. I have never known anything different until tonight. Then maybe tonight is the start of something different, Warren said. They stood there, human and orc, watching each other in the quiet cabin while outside a war party waited for dawn. Warren noticed details he had missed before: the way Kaza's tusks curved slightly upward, the small scar on her left ear, the patterns of darker green that traced her arms like natural tattoos. She was studying him with equal intensity, her gaze moving from his face to his hands to the old scar on his forearm from a war wound that never quite healed right. "You are not what I expected," Kaza said finally. "What did you expect?" "When I ran from the ceremony, I just ran. I had no plan, no destination. I knew only that I had to get away. When I saw your light through the trees, I almost kept running. Humans and orcs do not help each other. We kill each other or ignore each other or trade at a careful distance." "But I was bleeding and weak and terrified, and I thought," she laughed, the sound brittle. "I thought even if you killed me, at least it would be quick, and I would die free." The casual way she spoke of expecting death cut Warren deeper than he wanted to admit. "I am sorry," he said. "That the world has taught you to expect so little." "Do not apologize for the world," Kaza replied, "but thank you for being different from it." A shout from outside interrupted the moment. Warren moved back to the window to see the torches reorganizing into what looked like an assault formation. His jaw tightened. "They are preparing to attack. They must have decided that waiting until dawn gives me too much time to get help." Kaza came to stand beside him, looking out at the hunters. "How many can you stop before they reach the door?" "4, maybe 5 if I am lucky and they are stupid." Warren checked his rifle again, though he knew it was already loaded and ready. "After that it comes down to my pistol and that axe Garuk threw. Not great odds." "I can fight," Kaza said. She moved to the wall where Warren kept his weapons and pulled down a short sword, testing its weight. "I am trained. I may be wounded, but I am not helpless." Warren wanted to argue, to insist she stay back and stay safe, but the determination in her eyes stopped him. She was right, she was trained, and this was her fight as much as his. "Stay away from the door," he said instead. "If they break through, I will try to bottleneck them. You cover the windows." Kaza nodded and moved to position herself where she could see both windows on the cabin's side wall. The moonlight through the glass caught her profile, and Warren thought absurdly that she looked like something out of a legend, a warrior woman from the old stories his grandmother used to tell. Then the first torch started moving toward the cabin, and there was no more time for such thoughts. "Remember," Warren called out to the darkness, his voice carrying clear and firm. "This is an attack on territorial land. Every one of you will be charged as criminals. We will take our chances with your weak human laws." Garuk's voice boomed back. "Give me what is mine." Warren aimed carefully and fired. The lead torch dropped as its bearer fell with a scream. Immediately the others scattered, taking cover behind trees and rocks. Good, they were thinking tactically now, which would slow them down. He reloaded smoothly, the muscle memory from 1,000 drills guiding his hands. For several long minutes, nothing moved. Warren could feel sweat trickling down his back despite the cool night air. Beside him, Kaza stood perfectly still, the sword held in a guard position that spoke of real training. Her breathing was controlled even, and Warren remembered that orcs were born and bred for battle in a way humans were not. The attack, when it came, was coordinated. 3 orcs rushed from different angles simultaneously, while the others provided covering fire with arrows. Warren dropped one rusher, wounded another, but the third made it to the door and began slamming into it with his shoulder. The bar held, but the wood was already splintering. "Window!" Kaza shouted. Warren spun to see an orc climbing through the side window, and then Kaza was moving, faster than he would have thought possible in her wounded state. The sword flashed in the lamplight, and the orc fell back with a cry, blood streaming from a gash across his arm. Warren returned his attention to the door, drawing his pistol as the wood gave way with a thunderous crack. The orc burst through, and Warren fired point blank, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. The body fell and blocked the doorway, creating an obstacle for the next attacker, which bought them precious seconds. But only seconds. Another orc vaulted over his fallen comrade, this one carrying a massive war hammer. Warren barely dodged the first swing, the weapon smashing into his table and reducing it to splinters. He fired again and missed as the orc moved with surprising agility for his size. Then Kaza was there, her sword finding the gap under the orc's arm, and he went down with a roar that shook the rafters. "Enough!" Garuk's voice thundered from outside. "Stand down!" The remaining attackers retreated, dragging their wounded with them. Warren and Kaza stood in the wreckage of his cabin, breathing hard, weapons ready. One orc lay dead by the door and blood splattered the walls and floor. The smell of gunpowder and death filled the air. Why did they stop? Kaza gasped, pressing her hand against her side where the bandages were showing fresh blood. Warren moved to the shattered door and peered out carefully. What he saw made his stomach drop. The hunters had regrouped around a massive figure who could only be Garuk, and they were pointing south. Following their gaze, Warren saw what had changed everything. Torches in the distance, moving fast, at least 20 of them. Too many to be another orc war party. "Your neighbor," Kaza said, understanding dawning. "He came early, or he heard the shots," Warren said. He could make out figures now, human figures, some on horseback. "That is more than just Wyatt. He must have gone straight to town and brought back help." Garuk was shouting at his hunters, clearly furious. They argued back, gesturing at the approaching humans. Finally, Garuk pointed directly at the cabin and bellowed, "This is not over, female. You cannot hide among humans forever. You have dishonored your clan and broken sacred vows. There will be a reckoning." Then the war party melted back into the forest, moving with the eerie silence that orcs could manage when they chose. Within moments, they had vanished completely, leaving only trampled ground and discarded torches to show they had ever been there. Warren lowered his pistol and immediately turned to Kaza. "You are bleeding again. Sit down before you fall down." "I am fine," Kaza insisted, but she swayed as she said it. "You are stubborn," Warren corrected. He guided her to his armchair, the only piece of furniture that had survived the fight intact, and knelt to examine her wound. The stitches had held, but the bandage was soaked through. "You should not have fought. You could have torn this open completely." "I was not going to hide while you defended me," Kaza said. Her hand came to rest on his shoulder, and Warren looked up to find her watching him with an expression of such raw emotion that it made his breath catch. "You could have died. You nearly did, for me." "For what was right," Warren said, but even as he said it, he knew it was not entirely true. Somewhere between the moment she knocked on his door and now, this had become personal in a way he did not fully understand. The sound of horses approaching saved him from having to examine that thought too closely. Warren stood and moved to meet the arriving humans, recognizing Wyatt's lean frame in the lead. His neighbor pulled his horse to a stop and dismounted in one fluid motion, his weathered face split by a relieved grin. "Warren, we heard shots and feared the worst." Wyatt's eyes went past him to the shattered door and the orc body visible beyond. "What in the name of all that is holy happened here?" Warren gave him a concise version of the night's events, while the other men, farmers and townsmen Warren recognized from his occasional trips to settlement, secured the perimeter and tended to the wounded orc by the door, who had somehow survived. Magistrate Jacobson himself was present, a portly man with shrewd eyes who listened carefully while examining the scene. "This is going to cause quite a stir," Jacobson said when Warren finished. An orc woman fleeing a forced marriage, claiming sanctuary on human land, defended by a former soldier against a war party. The territorial governor will have opinions, I can promise you that. "What happens to her?" Warren asked bluntly. "Can they take her back?" Jacobson pursed his lips, thinking. Legally, it is complicated. The treaties give orcs autonomy over their own affairs, but those affairs cannot extend to criminal acts on human territory. An armed assault on a registered landowner is definitely criminal, which gives us jurisdiction. As for the woman herself, he moved past Warren to look at Kaza, who met his gaze steadily despite her exhaustion. "What is it you want, miss?" "Freedom," Kaza said simply. "I do not want to return to my clan. I do not want to marry Garuk. I want to live my own life, make my own choices." "Those are human concepts," Jacobson said, not unkindly. "Your people have different ways. Perhaps I want different ways." Kaza's voice was firm despite her weakened state. "If that makes me less of an orc, so be it. I choose freedom over tradition." Jacobson looked at Warren. "You understand what you are taking on if you shelter her. The orc clans will not forget this. There could be retaliation against you and against human settlements." "There could be," Warren agreed. "But if we return her to people who will hurt her, what does that say about our laws and our values?" "It says we are pragmatic," Jacobson replied. "Sometimes the right choice and the safe choice are not the same thing." "Then I will take the right choice over the safe one," Warren said. "I have done it before. I will do it again." The magistrate studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Very well. I will take this to the governor and the territorial council. In the meantime, the woman can remain here under your protection, Warren Jenkins, as her official sponsor and guardian under territorial law. But understand you are responsible for her actions, and you will be the first one they come after if things go wrong." Warren nodded. "I understand." The rest of the night passed in a blur of activity. The men helped Warren patch the door and secure the cabin, while a doctor from town examined Kaza and pronounced her lucky the wound would heal cleanly if she rested and avoided further exertion. The dead orc was wrapped and taken away for proper handling according to treaty protocols. The wounded one was treated and placed under guard, to be questioned later about the attack. By the time the sun rose, painting the eastern sky in shades of gold and pink, the circus had moved on. Only Wyatt remained, helping Warren clean up the worst of the destruction. The older man worked in silence until they had the cabin more or less back in order, then sat down heavily and fixed Warren with a knowing look. "So," Wyatt said, "you have adopted yourself an orc." "I am providing sanctuary to someone in need," Warren corrected. "Uh-huh." Wyatt's grin was wicked. "And the fact that she is a handsome young woman has nothing to do with it." "She was bleeding on my doorstep and running for her life," Warren said firmly. "What was I supposed to do, turn her away? Most men would have." Wyatt's expression grew more serious. "I am not saying you were wrong, Warren. I am saying you should think carefully about what comes next. That orc Garuk, he will not let this go, and her clan will see this as theft, no matter what our laws say. I know. Warren looked toward the bedroom where Kaza was resting under the doctor's orders, but I could not live with myself if I had done anything else. Wyatt clapped him on the shoulder. That is what I thought you would say. That is why I rode all night to fetch help instead of just waiting until morning like I originally planned. He stood to leave, then paused. For what it is worth, I think you did the right thing, even if it was the hard thing. After Wyatt left, Warren sat alone in his patched cabin, watching the morning light grow stronger. He was exhausted, running on nothing but determination and too much coffee, but sleep felt impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that moment when Kaza first appeared in his doorway, bleeding and desperate and asking for help. "You should rest," a voice said from the bedroom door. Kaza stood there, wrapped in the spare blanket he had left for her, looking small and vulnerable despite her warrior's frame. "You have not slept at all." "Neither have you," Warren pointed out. "I tried. I cannot stop thinking." Kaza moved into the room, settling carefully into the armchair. "Everything has changed. I can never go back to my clan now. I am severed from everything I have ever known. I should feel grief, but all I feel is relief, and that frightens me." Warren understood that feeling better than she knew. "When I left the army, I felt the same way. Like I should mourn what I was losing, but instead I just felt free." "Were you free?" Kaza asked. "Or did you just trade one prison for another?" The question was more perceptive than Warren expected. "I am not sure. I thought isolation was freedom, but maybe I was just hiding. Running away from the world instead of finding my place in it. And now I seem to have the world coming to my door whether I want it or not." Warren smiled tiredly. "But at least it is interesting." Kaza laughed, then winced and pressed her hand to her side. "Interesting. That is one word for it." She looked at him seriously. "Warren Jenkins, I owe you my life. By orc tradition, that creates a debt that can only be repaid with blood or with service. I am your bondmate now, bound to serve until the debt is cleared." "I do not want a bondmate or a servant," Warren said immediately. "I want—" He paused, realizing he did not quite know how to finish that sentence. "What did he want, then what?" Kaza pressed. "I have nowhere to go, no clan, no family. The magistrate made you my guardian." "What does that mean for us?" Warren stood and moved to look out the window at his land, the fields he had cleared and planted, the small barn he had built, the fence line that marked his property's edge. "It means you stay here as long as you need to. It means you are safe and free to make your own choices. And when you have healed and figured out what you want from your life, if you choose to leave, I will not stop you. And if I choose to stay," the question hung in the air, heavy with implications neither of them was quite ready to examine. Warren turned to face her, meeting those amber eyes that seemed to see right through him. "Then you stay, and we figure out what that means together." The days that followed fell into a pattern that felt both strange and natural. Kaza's wound healed slowly but steadily, and as her strength returned, she insisted on helping with the work around the farm despite Warren's protests. She learned to care for his small herd of goats, to tend the vegetable garden, to maintain the fence lines that kept predators away from the livestock. She was a quick learner and a hard worker, approaching each task with a focus that Warren recognized from his own military training. They talked while they worked, sharing stories of their vastly different lives. Warren learned about orc culture, the complex web of clan loyalties, the honor codes that governed everything from combat to courtship, the deep connection to the land and spirits that humans had never quite understood. Kaza learned about human systems of government, the territorial laws that were slowly bringing order to the frontier, the technologies and innovations that were changing how people lived and worked. "Your people build such permanent things," Kaza observed one afternoon as they repaired the barn roof. "Orcs move with the seasons. We have winter settlements and summer grounds, following the herds and the good hunting. But humans plant roots and stay. Is that bad?" Warren asked, hammering a shingle into place. "No, just different. I am beginning to understand why humans and orcs struggle to coexist. We see the world through such different eyes." Kaza handed him another shingle. "But maybe that is not insurmountable. Maybe we just need to learn each other's languages, not just the words but the ways of thinking." Warren paused to look at her. In the afternoon sun, with her hair tied back and wearing practical clothes he had modified to fit her, Kaza looked less like the desperate bride who had appeared on his doorstep and more like someone who belonged here. The thought sent a strange warmth through his chest. "What?" Kaza asked, noticing his stare. "You look happy," Warren said. "More so than when you first arrived." Kaza considered this. "I think I am. It is strange I have lost everything I was supposed to want, everything my clan valued, and yet I feel more myself than ever before. Is that wrong?" "Not wrong," Warren assured her. "Just honest." The Territorial Council met 3 weeks after the incident to discuss Kaza's case. Warren was summoned to appear, and he insisted that Kaza come with him, despite her nervousness about entering a human town. They rode to the settlement together, Kaza sitting behind Warren on his horse, her arms around his waist for balance. He was acutely aware of her presence, the warmth of her body against his back, the way she tensed whenever they passed other travelers on the road. The council chambers were a simple wooden building that doubled as the town hall. Inside, a dozen men and women sat in a semicircle, ranging from farmers to merchants to the territorial governor herself, a steel-haired woman named Governor Harriet Lawson. They listened as Magistrate Jacobson presented the facts of the case, as Warren testified about the events of that night, and as Kaza spoke on her own behalf with a dignity that clearly impressed even the skeptics present. "The question before us is simple," Governor Lawson said when everyone had spoken. "Does this council grant sanctuary to Kaza of the Red Stone clan, knowing it may provoke diplomatic tensions with the orc nations?" There was debate, some heated, some measured. Some council members argued for pragmatism and returning Kaza to avoid conflict. Others spoke about moral obligations and the principles their society claimed to uphold. Warren sat rigid in his chair, his hands clenched into fists, forcing himself to stay silent and let the process play out. In the end, it came down to a vote. 7 for granting sanctuary, 5 against. Governor Lawson banged her gavel and pronounced, "By the authority vested in me by the territorial government, I declare Kaza of the Red Stone clan to be under the protection of human law. She is granted residency status and the right to remain on territorial lands. Warren Jenkins is confirmed as her sponsor and guardian, responsible for her integration into our society." Warren felt the tension drain from his shoulders. Beside him, Kaza made a small sound that might have been a laugh or a sob or both. "Thank you," she said to the governor. "You cannot know what this means." "I hope it proves to be the right decision," Governor Lawson replied, "for all our sakes." They stayed in town that night, at Wyatt's insistence that they celebrate properly. The local tavern was crowded and loud, filled with people who had heard about the runaway bride and wanted to see her for themselves. Warren stayed close to Kaza, ready to intervene if anyone caused trouble, but to his surprise, most people were merely curious. A few were even friendly, offering congratulations and asking questions about orc customs with genuine interest. "They are not what I expected," Kaza said quietly as they sat in a corner table, nursing drinks. I was taught that humans were weak, treacherous, always planning betrayals. But these people, they are just people. Good and bad, kind and cruel, no different from orcs except in appearance. That is what I learned during the war, Warren said. The enemy is never as monstrous as we are told. They are just people protecting what they think is theirs, fighting for what they believe is right. It does not make war less tragic, but it makes it harder to hate. Kaza looked at him over the rim of her cup. You are a strange human, Warren Jenkins. You are a strange orc, Kaza. He paused. Can you still claim the Redstone clan name? No, Kaza said simply. I am clanless now, just Kaza. She set down her cup. Perhaps I will take a new name, something to mark this new life. Is that something humans do? Sometimes, Warren said. When people get married or adopted into a new family or want to leave their past behind. What would you suggest? Warren thought about it. You need a surname now for the legal paperwork, something that means something to you. An idea struck him. What about Freestone? For the freedom you claimed and the red stone you came from. Kaza tested the name silently, her lips forming the syllables. Kaza Freestone. Yes, I like that. It is a bridge between what I was and what I am becoming. Then Kaza Freestone it is, Warren said, and they touched cups in a toast to new beginnings. The ride home the next morning was quiet but comfortable. Warren found himself very aware of Kaza's presence behind him, the way she rested her cheek against his shoulder, her arms loose and trusting around his waist. Somewhere along the way, his initial impulse to help someone in need had transformed into something more complex. He looked forward to seeing her each morning, enjoyed their conversations while they worked, found excuses to be near her. He realized with something like shock, developing feelings for her. The thought should have been disturbing. They were different species, from cultures that had been enemies for generations. Their relationship violated every social norm of both their peoples. And yet, when he searched his heart for disgust or shame, he found only a growing warmth and the certainty that Kaza mattered to him in ways no one else had in years. Warren, Kaza said softly, interrupting his thoughts. When we get home, there is something I need to tell you. You can tell me now, Warren said. No, it is important and I want to say it properly when we are alone. There was something in her voice that made Warren's pulse quicken, but he did not press. When they finally reached the cabin, Warren tended to the horse while Kaza went inside to start preparing a meal. He took his time with the animal, brushing it down and checking its shoes, partly because it needed to be done and partly because he was nervous about whatever Kaza wanted to say. Finally, there was no more delaying and he walked into the cabin to find her standing by the fireplace, her hands clasped in front of her. I have been thinking, Kaza began without preamble, about my life debt to you, about what it means to be your ward, about everything that has happened. She took a breath. In orc culture, when someone saves your life and you have nothing to give them in return, there is a way to honor that debt. You offer yourself as a mate. It is the highest form of bond, a voluntary linking of lives and fates. Warren's heart was pounding so hard he was sure Kaza could hear it. What are you saying? I am saying that I have come to care for you, Warren Jenkins, not as a savior or a guardian, but as a man. You are kind when you could be cruel, gentle when you could be harsh, patient when you have every reason to be frustrated. You work hard, you speak honestly, you laugh at my jokes even when they are not very funny. You make me feel safe and valued and seen in ways I have never experienced. Kaza's voice was shaking now. I know this is impossible. I know our peoples would never accept it, but I cannot keep lying to myself about what I feel. I want to stay here not because I have nowhere else to go, but because I cannot imagine being anywhere you are not. Warren crossed the room in 3 strides and took her hands in his. Kaza, the word stuck in his throat, too big and too important to say carelessly. I have been alone for so long. I thought I wanted it that way, thought I was done with people and their complications. But you walked into my life bleeding and desperate and braver than anyone I have ever met, and somehow you made me remember what it feels like to care about someone. To wake up looking forward to the day because you will be there. To go to sleep grateful because you are safe under my roof. I do not know if what I feel is what you would call love, but it is the closest thing I have ever felt to it. Kaza's eyes were bright with tears. My people would say I am a traitor. That lying with a human is the ultimate betrayal of my blood and my clan. My people would say I am a fool, Warren replied. That trusting an orc will get me killed. That interspecies romance is unnatural and wrong. They are probably both right, Kaza said, but she was smiling through her tears. Probably, Warren agreed. But I stopped caring about what other people think when I left the army. I only care about what we think, what we feel, what we choose. He squeezed her hands gently. And I choose you if you will have me. I choose you, Kaza said. And then she was kissing him, her tusks brushing against his cheeks, her hands tangling in his hair, and Warren stopped thinking entirely, lost in the warmth and wonder of holding someone who mattered, someone who had chosen him as completely as he had chosen her. They pulled apart eventually, breathless and grinning like fools. So what now? Kaza asked. In human culture, what happens when 2 people decide they want to be together? Usually courtship, Warren said. We would spend time together, get to know each other better, eventually discuss marriage if things went well. We live together, work together, and share every meal, Kaza pointed out. I think we have done the courtship part, Warren laughed. Fair point. What about in orc culture? In orc culture, when both parties agree to be mates, they exchange vows and tokens before witnesses from their clans. Then they bind their wrists with a sacred cord and jump over a fire together to symbolize their shared future. Kaza looked thoughtful. But I have no clan and you have no family here, so that would be difficult. We could make our own ceremony, Warren suggested. Take the parts that matter to each of us and create something new. They spent the evening planning, talking late into the night about what they wanted their commitment to look like. It would be private, they decided, just the 2 of them, because this was about them and no one else. They would exchange vows, but also tokens. Warren would give Kaza a knife he had inherited from his grandfather, a sign of trust and protection. And Kaza would give Warren a bracelet woven from her own hair in the orcish tradition, a piece of herself to carry always. They would not jump over a fire, but they would plant a tree together, a symbol of roots and growth and the life they would build. 3 days later, on a warm summer evening, they held their ceremony in the clearing behind the cabin. Warren spoke his vows first, promising to stand beside Kaza in good times and bad, to respect her strength and honor her choices, to be her partner and her friend for as long as they both lived. Kaza spoke in return, promising to share Warren's burdens and celebrate his joys, to bring the best of her heritage to their shared life, to choose him every day as he had first chosen her that desperate midnight. They exchanged their tokens, Warren placing the knife in Kaza's hands with reverence, Kaza tying the hair bracelet around Warren's wrist with fingers that trembled slightly. Then together they dug a hole and planted a young oak tree, watering it with water they had carried from the stream, pressing the soil down around its roots with their joined hands. Grow strong, Kaza said to the sapling. Weather the storms and reach for the sun. Be the proof that 2 different things can grow together and create something beautiful. That is a good blessing, Warren said softly. It is an old orc blessing for new homes, Kaza replied. I am giving it to our tree, to our life together." They stood hand in hand as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Warren thought about the path that had led him here, the war, the disillusionment, the years of isolation, and finally that night when a desperate knock had changed everything. Life had a strange way of bringing you exactly what you needed when you were ready for it, even if you did not know you were searching. "What are you thinking?" Kaza asked. "That I am happy," Warren said simply. "For the first time in years I am genuinely happy." "So am I," Kaza said. She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "So am I." The weeks that followed were perhaps the best of Warren's life. He and Kaza fell into an easy partnership, working the farm during the day and spending their evenings talking, planning, dreaming about the future they were building together. They discussed expanding the garden, maybe getting a cow, eventually building a larger house. Kaza suggested they could offer their land as neutral ground for any orcs who wanted to trade with humans peacefully. And Warren thought it was a brilliant idea that could help bridge the gap between their peoples. But happiness, Warren had learned long ago, was always fragile on the frontier. The first warning came from Wyatt, who rode out one morning with news from town. "There has been talk," he said gravely as he sat in their kitchen, accepting the tea Kaza poured for him. "Orc envoys have been meeting with the territorial government. They are demanding that Kaza be returned, claiming her sanctuary violates the spirit of the treaties even if it follows the letter." "The council already voted," Warren said. "She is a legal resident." "Legal and political are not always the same thing," Wyatt replied. "There are people on the council who are nervous about provoking a conflict. They are looking for reasons to reverse the decision." Kaza set down her teacup carefully. "What are they saying specifically? That you are a security risk, that you might be a spy for the orc nations, that your presence endangers the settlement?" Wyatt looked apologetic. "I am just telling you what I heard. Most people do not believe it, but there is enough doubt to cause problems." "Then we need to prove them wrong," Warren said. "Show that Kaza is not a threat but an asset." Over the following weeks, they did exactly that. Kaza began teaching human children about orcish agriculture techniques that were better suited to the local soil than traditional human methods. She helped mediate a dispute between a human hunter and an orc trapper over territorial boundaries, earning respect from both sides. She volunteered at the settlement's clinic, where her knowledge of orcish medicine and her natural strength made her invaluable. Slowly, opinion began to shift. People stopped seeing Kaza as a dangerous outsider and started seeing her as simply Kaza, helpful, hardworking, kind. Even the most skeptical council members had to admit that she had done nothing to justify their fears. But Garuk had not forgotten. The attack came on a cold autumn night, 3 months after Kaza had first knocked on Warren's door. Warren woke to the smell of smoke and sat bolt upright in bed, his soldiers' instincts screaming danger. Beside him, Kaza was already moving, grabbing weapons from where they kept them within easy reach. "The barn," Warren said, looking out the window at the flames already consuming the small structure. The animals, they ran outside together, Kaza heading for the barn to free the goats while Warren looked for the source of the attack. He found it in the form of 6 masked figures retreating toward the forest, too far away to catch or identify but close enough that Warren could see their size and movement patterns. Orcs, without question. By the time they got the fire under control with help from Wyatt and other neighbors who had seen the flames, the barn was a total loss. The goats had survived thanks to Kaza's quick action, but months of stored feed and supplies were gone. And painted on the side of Warren's cabin in crude letters were the words, "Return what was stolen. Garuk, Kaza said, her voice flat with barely controlled rage. "This is his doing, attacking your property, threatening your livelihood, all to punish me." "We do not know that for certain," Magistrate Jacobson said. He had arrived with the last group of helpers, and now he stood examining the damage with a grim expression. "But I agree it seems likely. This is a deliberate escalation." "What can we do?" Warren asked. "Is there any legal recourse?" "Against unknown attackers who left no evidence besides a threatening message? Not much." Jacobson sighed. "I am sorry, Warren. Unless we can prove who did this and why, it is just property damage." After everyone else had left and the sun was rising on the ashes of the barn, Warren and Kaza sat together on the porch, exhausted and covered in soot. "This is because of me," Kaza said quietly. "He is punishing you for helping me." "He is proving that he is exactly the kind of person you were right to run from," Warren corrected. "This changes nothing about my choice to help you." "But it should," Kaza insisted. "Warren, look at what you have lost: a barn, some supplies, things that can be rebuilt and replaced." Warren took her hand firmly. "I have not lost what matters. You are safe, we are together, and everything else is just details." Kaza leaned against him, and Warren felt her shoulders shake with silent tears. He held her while she cried, letting her grief and anger and frustration pour out. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red but determined. "We need to end this. I need to face Garuk and finish what I started when I ran from that wedding." "Absolutely not," Warren said immediately. "That is exactly what he wants to lure you out where he can take you." "Then what do you suggest? We wait for him to attack again, to hurt more people, to burn down everything you have built." Kaza stood and paced across the porch. "I will not hide behind you forever, Warren. I need to stand up and face this." "Then we face it together," Warren said. "But smart, with planning and backup, not by walking into a trap." They spent the next week preparing. Warren called in every favor he had, reaching out to former military contacts and friendly settlers. Magistrate Jacobson, convinced now that the attack was orchestrated, agreed to pressure the orc envoys for a formal meeting to address the situation. Governor Lawson herself got involved, making it clear that attacks on territorial citizens, human or orc, would not be tolerated. Finally, a meeting was arranged. Garuk and representatives from the Iron Fist clan would meet with Kaza, Warren, and territorial authorities on neutral ground to attempt to resolve the dispute. Both sides would bring no more than 10 people. All would be unarmed, and violence would be considered a violation of the peace treaty with severe consequences. The meeting took place in a clearing halfway between the human settlement and the nearest orc village. Warren stood beside Kaza, acutely aware of the territorial deputies positioned around the perimeter, there to enforce the peace, but also woefully outnumbered if things went wrong. Across from them, Garuk loomed like a mountain, easily 6.5 feet of solid muscle, his tusks huge and yellow, his eyes burning with rage barely held in check. "So," Garuk rumbled, his voice like grinding stone, "the runaway bride hides behind human law and human lovers." "I hide behind nothing," Kaza said, her voice steady despite the fear Warren could feel in the tension of her body beside his. "I claim my right to choose my own path, as is granted to every person under territorial law." "You are not a person," Garuk spat. "You are orc. You are bound by orc law, orc tradition. The marriage contract was sealed with blood and witnessed by both our clans. You shame yourself and your family with this cowardice. The only shame is in forcing someone into a bond they do not want," Kaza shot back. "Especially when that someone is running from a man who murdered his last wife." Garuk's roar shook the clearing. Several deputies moved forward, hands on weapons, and Governor Lawson stepped between the two groups. Enough. This meeting is about finding a peaceful resolution, not relitigating old grievances. There is no resolution, Garak snarled. Only the return of what belongs to me. Kaza belongs to no one but herself, Warren said, speaking for the first time, and I will die before I let you take her. Garak's eyes focused on Warren with an intensity that was almost physical. You are the human who sheltered her, who fought my warriors, who dares to claim an orc woman as your own. He took a step forward, and though he was technically unarmed, every line of his body radiated threat. I challenge you. Single combat by the old laws. I win, the female returns with me. You win, I withdraw all claims. No, Kaza said immediately. Warren, do not agree to this. But Warren was already nodding. I accept. Warren, Kaza grabbed his arm. He will kill you, look at him. You cannot possibly. Do you trust me? Warren asked quietly, meeting her eyes. Kaza searched his face, and whatever she saw there made her slowly nod. Yes, but I do not want to watch you die for me. Then trust that I will not die. Warren turned to the governor. Single combat to settle the dispute. That is legal under the old frontier codes, correct? Governor Lawson looked deeply unhappy. It is legal, yes, though rarely invoked anymore. But Mr. Jenkins, you must understand that combat to resolution means you fight until one party yields or is unable to continue. It is not a sporting match, I understand. Warren looked back at Garak. Tomorrow at dawn here in this clearing. Agreed. Agreed, Garak said, and his smile was terrible to see. That night, Warren checked and rechecked his equipment while Kaza paced the cabin like a caged animal. This is insane, she said for the 10th time. Warren, he is twice your size and trained since childhood in combat. He will crush you. Probably, Warren agreed calmly. He was sharpening his knife, the same one he had given to Kaza during their ceremony. If it comes down to pure strength, yes, I will lose, but fights are not won by strength alone. Then what? Kaza demanded. What is your plan? Warren set down the knife and took her hands. Do you remember what I told you about being a soldier, about how I kept men alive in bad situations? You said you were good at tactics. More than that. I learned how to read my opponent, find their weaknesses, turn their own strength against them. Garak is big and strong and angry. That anger is a vulnerability. He will fight like he always has, using power and intimidation. But power is useless if you cannot land a hit. Warren smiled slightly. I might not be able to beat him, but I can outlast him. Tire him out, frustrate him, make him careless. And when he makes a mistake, I will be ready. Kaza did not look convinced, but she held him tightly that night, her face buried against his chest. Promise me you will survive this, she whispered. Promise me we will have the life we planned, the bigger house, the trading post, the garden full of flowers. Promise me. I promise, Warren said, and he meant it with everything in him. Dawn came cold and gray, mist rising from the ground in ghostly wisps. The clearing was crowded with observers, humans on one side, orcs on the other, the territorial authorities trying to maintain order in the middle. Warren stripped to his waist despite the chill, knowing that excess clothing would only slow him down. Across from him, Garak did the same, revealing a body covered in scars that told the story of a lifetime of violence. Last chance to yield, Garak called. Give me the female and walk away with your life. Come and take her, Warren replied. If you can. The fight began without ceremony. Garak charging forward like a bull with a roar that echoed off the surrounding trees. Warren sidestepped at the last possible moment, letting the orc's momentum carry him past, then darted in to slash at Garak's ribs with his knife. It was a glancing blow, barely breaking skin, but it drew first blood and proved a point. Warren was faster. Garak spun with shocking speed for his size and swung a massive fist. Warren ducked under it, feeling the wind of its passage, and rolled away. They circled each other, Warren light on his feet, Garak prowling like a predator. The orc was being more cautious now, having learned that brute force alone would not work. They clashed again and again, and each time Warren danced away before Garak could land a solid hit. He scored small cuts on the orc's arms, chest, and legs, nothing deep but a steady accumulation of damage. More importantly, he was making Garak work, forcing him to chase, burning his energy while conserving his own. But Warren was not escaping unscathed. A glancing blow from Garak's fist sent him sprawling, and before he could fully recover, a kick caught his ribs hard enough to crack bone. Warren gasped, tasted blood, and rolled desperately away from a stomp that would have caved in his skull. "You fight like a coward," Garak taunted, breathing hard now. Like all humans, dancing and hiding. Warren did not waste breath on a response. He circled, watching, waiting. Garak was favoring his right leg slightly. One of Warren's cuts had gone deeper than the others. The orc's breathing was labored, and sweat poured down his face despite the cold. Warren's plan was working, but the question was whether he could last long enough to see it through. His ribs screamed with every breath, and he could feel his own strength fading. They came together in a furious exchange, knife against fist, and Warren felt something in his left arm snap when he blocked a punch. He bit back a scream and ducked away, his left arm now hanging useless at his side. Garak saw the injury and smiled, sensing victory. "Done running?" the orc asked. "Not yet," Warren gritted out. He shifted his knife to his left hand, making Garak think he was desperate, and when the orc charged and confident of an easy finish, Warren did the last thing Garak expected. He charged too. They met in the center of the clearing, and Warren took a devastating punch to the face that blacked out his vision for a moment. But his right hand found what it was reaching for, the pressure point at the base of Garak's skull, where neck met spine, and he drove his thumb into it with all his remaining strength. Garak's legs buckled. It was not enough to knock him out, but it was enough to drop him to one knee, momentarily stunned. Warren brought his knee up into the orc's face, feeling tusks cut his leg even as he heard Garak's nose break. They fell in a tangle, Warren on top, and he got his knife hand free and pressed the blade against Garak's throat. "Yield," Warren gasped through blood and broken teeth. "Yield or I will end this." Garak stared up at him, eyes wide with shock and rage and something that might have been respect. For a long moment, time seemed frozen. Then, almost imperceptibly, Garak nodded. "I yield," the orc said, his voice barely a whisper. Warren rolled off and lay on his back, staring up at the sky, every part of his body screaming. He heard shouting, felt hands on him, Kaza's hands, he realized, her voice saying his name over and over. The territorial doctor was there too, doing something to his broken arm that made him finally pass out. He woke 2 days later in his own bed, his body wrapped in bandages, his left arm in a splint. Kaza sat beside him, and when she saw his eyes open, she burst into tears. "You insane, stubborn, magnificent fool," she said through her crying. "You nearly died. The doctor said you have 2 broken ribs, a fractured arm, a concussion, and more cuts and bruises than he could count. You should not have survived that fight." "But I did," Warren managed to say, his voice rough. And Garak yielded. "You are free, Kaza, truly free." "I do not care about freedom if you are dead." Kaza took his hand carefully, avoiding the bandages. "Promise me you will never do anything that's stupid again." "I promise to try," Warren said, which was the best he could offer. "Where is Garak now?" "Gone." He and his clan left the territory the same day. The territorial government has formally recognized our marriage well. Our bond is legal. No one will contest your guardianship of me again." Kaza smiled through her tears. "We won, Warren. We actually won." Warren's recovery was slow and painful, but Kaza was there every step of the way, helping him relearn how to use his arm, keeping his spirits up through the long, boring days of bed rest, running the farm with the help of Wyatt and other neighbors who pitched in. By the time winter truly set in, Warren was mobile again, though his body would carry the scars of that fight for the rest of his life. They rebuilt the barn together that spring, a project that turned into a community event as both human and orc volunteers showed up to help. Kaza's willingness to stand up to Garuk and Warren's victory in combat had earned them a reputation. They were the couple who had defied tradition, and one who had proven that different peoples could coexist and even love each other. Young orcs came seeking advice about dealing with human neighbors. Human families invited Kaza to teach their children. The trading post they had dreamed of became a reality, a neutral ground where anyone was welcome. 5 years after that desperate midnight when Kaza had pounded on Warren's door, they stood together on their porch, watching the sunset over land that had become truly theirs. The oak tree they had planted during their ceremony was thriving, already taller than a person, its branches spreading wide. Their home had grown 2-3 rooms now instead of one, and there were plans for more. "You ever regret it?" Kaza asked, her hand resting on her stomach where new life was beginning to grow. "Taking me in that night. Everything that came after." Warren pulled her close, careful of her condition. "Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, even with the scars. The broken bones, the burned barn, even with all of that," Warren confirmed. "You want to know what I regret? All the years I spent alone here thinking I wanted isolation. I was not living, Kaza. I was just existing. You taught me the difference." Kaza kissed him, a gentle press of lips that still made Warren's heart race even after years together. "I love you, Warren Jenkins, my strange, stubborn, wonderful human. I love you too, Kaza Freestone, my fierce, brave, beautiful wife." They stood together as the sun finally dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire. Somewhere in the house, dinner was cooking. Tomorrow there would be work to do, visitors to welcome, plans to make for the future. But in that moment, Warren was simply content, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought a desperate orc woman to his door and changed everything. The world had not suddenly become perfect. There was still prejudice to overcome, still people on both sides who disapproved of their relationship, still challenges to face. But they faced them together, human and orc, building something new from the ashes of old hatreds. And when their daughter was born 6 months later, with her father's green eyes and her mother's small tusks, with skin the color of fresh earth and a cry that made them both laugh through happy tears, Warren thought about that midnight question he had asked. "Are you hungry?" Such a simple question, such a profound answer, because Kaza had been hungry for freedom, for choice, for a life that was truly her own. And in feeding that hunger, Warren had discovered he had been starving too, for connection and purpose and love. They named their daughter Freya, meaning noble lady, a name that belonged to neither orc nor human tradition, but to something new they were creating together. And as Warren held his tiny daughter, with Kaza resting beside him and the future stretching bright and unknown before them, he knew with absolute certainty that he would do it all again in a heartbeat. Some stories end in tragedy, with lovers torn apart by circumstance or prejudice. Some end in bittersweet sacrifice, with happiness purchased at too high a price. But some stories, the rare and precious few, end exactly as they should, with love triumphant, with family formed, with two people who found each other in the darkness and built a life filled with light. Warren and Kaza's story was one of those. And every year on the anniversary of that desperate midnight, they would plant another tree in their growing grove, watering it together while their children played nearby, marking another year of a life chosen freely and lived fully together. The runaway bride who had pounded on a stranger's door in desperation had become a pillar of the community, a bridge between peoples, a devoted partner and mother. The lonely soldier who had opened that door asking only if she was hungry had become a husband, a father, a man who had finally found peace not in isolation but in connection. And the question that had started it all, "Are you hungry?" had been answered in ways neither of them could have imagined that cold midnight. Hungry for freedom, yes, for safety, for kindness, for a chance at something better. But also hungry for love, for partnership, for a future built on choice rather than obligation. They had fed those hungers together, and in doing so had created something beautiful and lasting and true. A home that welcomed all, a family that defied categories, a love that bridged worlds. And as the years passed and their children grew and their grove of anniversary trees became a forest, Warren and Kaza would sometimes sit together on their porch, watching the sunset as they had done for decades, and simply be grateful. Grateful for the choices that had led them here, for the courage to defy expectations, for the love that had sustained them through every challenge. "Are you happy?" Kaza would sometimes ask, echoing that first question in different words. And Warren would always answer the same way, with truth and certainty and a heart full to bursting. "Yes, yes, I am." And that, in the end, was the only answer that mattered.